Elizabeth Kenyon, the teacher who vanished after work. On the afternoon of March 5, 1984, 23-year-old Elizabeth Beth Kenyon finished work at Coral Gables Senior High School in South Florida. Beth taught students with special needs and coached the school's cheerleading squad. She was seen speaking briefly with a security guard before driving away from the school parking lot in her Chrysler convertible. She never returned to her apartment. The following day, she failed to report for work. Her purse had been left behind. She had not packed for a trip, and no one close to her knew of any reason she would suddenly disappear. 6 days later, Beth's car was found abandoned at Miami International Airport. Her name did not appear on the passenger manifests for any departing flight, and investigators found no evidence that she had voluntarily left Florida. A gasoline station employee later reported seeing Beth speaking with a man beside a Cadillac. The conversation appeared to involve taking her photograph. The man was later identified by witnesses as Christopher Wilder, a wealthy businessman, race car driver, and photographer who knew Beth personally. Within weeks, Wilder would become the subject of a nationwide manhunt involving the abductions and murders of several young women across the United States. It is believed he murdered at least 8 women, while 9 deaths or disappearances have commonly been linked to his 1984 crime spree. Investigators suspect there may have been additional victims. But Beth's body was never found, and Wilder died before he could be questioned fully about what happened to her. More than 40 years later, her disappearance remains officially unresolved. Welcome to Cold Cases with Alan Key. I'm Alan Key, a former major crimes detective and current polygraph examiner. In this episode, we will examine Beth Kenyon's life, her final known movements, the investigation, the evidence involving Christopher Wilder, and the reasons the case has never been officially solved. Christopher Wilder is widely considered the primary suspect, but he was never tried or convicted in Beth's case. I will clearly separate documented evidence from conclusions that have never been proved in court. My book, Cold Cases: The Most Infamous Unsolved Murders and the Science That Could Solve Them Today, examines cases like Beth's and the modern investigative techniques that may still provide answers. It is available now on Amazon at the link below. This is the disappearance of Elizabeth Ann Kenyon. Who was Beth Kenyon? Elizabeth Ann Kenyon was born on January 11, 1961. Known to her family and friends as Beth, she grew up in South Florida and attended the University of Miami. While in college, she was a cheerleader and became involved in modeling and beauty competitions. Beth was named an Orange Bowl Princess in 1982 and later became a finalist in a Miss Florida competition. But modeling was only one part of her life. After graduating, Beth began working at Coral Gables Senior High School, where she taught students with special needs. She also coached cheerleaders at the school. Those responsibilities required patience, reliability, and a commitment to young people. By every available account, Beth took those responsibilities seriously. At the time of her disappearance, she lived with a roommate in an apartment on Ives Dairy Road, north of Miami. Her parents lived farther up the coast in Pompano Beach. Beth was 5 feet 7 or 5 feet 8 inches tall, weighed approximately 125 pounds, and had brown hair with blonde highlights and hazel eyes. She was 23 years old and at the beginning of both her professional and adult life. Monday, March 5, 1984, began as a normal day. Beth reported to Coral Gables Senior High School and completed her workday. At approximately 3 o'clock that afternoon, she was seen in the school parking lot. According to the surviving case summaries, Beth spoke to a security guard before leaving in her Chrysler convertible. That was the last undisputed sighting of her. When Beth did not return to her apartment, her roommate was not immediately alarmed. Beth's parents lived about 30 miles away, and the roommate believed she might have decided to visit them. That assumption was reasonable at first. Beth was an adult with a car and an active personal life. There was no obvious evidence that she had been threatened or taken against her will. But Beth had left her purse behind. She was apparently carrying a duffel bag containing exercise clothing and a curling iron, but she had not taken the belongings normally associated with an extended trip. She had not told her family, roommate, or employer that she planned to leave town. When Beth failed to report to school the next day, concern quickly grew. Her absence from work was out of character, and there was still no contact from her. She was reported missing. One of the most important and most debated parts of the case involved employees at a Shell gasoline station in Coral Gables. Beth was a regular customer, so at least one attendant was familiar with her and her car. The attendant later reported seeing Beth at the station after the date she was last seen leaving school. The commonly reported date is March 8th, 3 days after her disappearance. Beth was reportedly speaking with a man who was driving a Cadillac Eldorado. Their conversation seemed to involve photography or someone taking pictures of Beth. The man paid for her gasoline. Beth reportedly said she was going to the airport, and the two vehicles left the station. Witnesses later identified the man in photographs as Christopher Wilder. This sighting is significant, but it must be evaluated carefully. It was not recorded by a surveillance camera. There is no photograph showing Beth and Wilder together at the station, and the precise date and details depended on witness memory. Investigators would need to determine whether the attendant was certain about the date, whether Beth was definitely the woman observed, and whether the identification of Wilder was independently reliable. However, the account could not simply be dismissed. The attendant knew Beth as a customer. The man reportedly discussed photography, and Wilder was known to approach attractive young women using offers involving modeling and photographs. If the witness account was accurate, it may have placed Beth with Wilder shortly before her car was abandoned at the airport. On March 11, 1984, 6 days after Beth left work, her Chrysler convertible was found at Miami International Airport. An airport parking lot can provide an effective place to abandon a vehicle. Thousands of people travel through the area. Cars may remain parked for days before attracting attention, and the presence of one vehicle does not immediately appear suspicious. Leaving Beth's car at the airport could also create the impression that she had boarded an airplane and voluntarily left Miami. Investigators checked passenger information, but found no indication that Beth had taken a flight. She had not packed clothing for a trip, and her family knew of no destination she planned to visit. Her sudden departure would have been inconsistent with her responsibilities at school and her normal pattern of communication. The airport therefore appeared to be less of a departure point and more of a place where someone wanted investigators to find her car. The discovery provided an important location, but not necessarily a crime scene. By the time the vehicle was recovered, several days had passed. Investigators in 1984 did not possess the touch DNA testing, cellular tracking, license plate cameras, or airport surveillance networks available today. Even if fingerprints or hairs were collected, investigators still had to determine whether they came from an offender or from someone who had innocently been inside Beth's vehicle. No publicly disclosed physical evidence from the Chrysler has conclusively identified the person who left it at the airport. Christopher Bernard Wilder was an Australian-born businessman who lived in Boynton Beach, Florida. To many people, he appeared successful and sophisticated. He owned expensive vehicles, participated in automobile racing, and had an interest in photography. He also had a documented history of sexual violence. In 1980, Wilder pleaded guilty in Florida to attempted sexual battery involving a teenage girl. During a visit to Australia, he was accused of kidnapping and sexually assaulting 2 teenage girls. After being released on bail, he returned to the United States and did not return for his scheduled trial. By 1984, Wilder was approaching women in public places and presenting himself as a photographer or someone connected with modeling opportunities. The approach was effective because it did not initially appear threatening. A young woman interested in modeling might reasonably agree to discuss a photo session, walk toward a vehicle, or travel to another location. The offender could establish control before the victim understood the danger. Beth was a former model and beauty pageant finalist. More importantly, she already knew Wilder. According to case summaries, Beth and Wilder had dated several times. Wilder had reportedly proposed marriage, but Beth rejected the proposal, partly because of the difference in their ages. That prior relationship meant Wilder would not have needed to approach Beth as a complete stranger. She might have agreed to speak with him, meet him, or follow his vehicle without immediately feeling that she was in danger. Investigators located Wilder and questioned him about Beth's disappearance. He reportedly said that he had not seen her for more than a month. That claim conflicted with the gasoline station witnesses who said they saw Beth with a man they identified as Wilder around the time she vanished. Investigators also learned that Wilder appeared to know where Beth's car had been found before the location had been released publicly. Knowledge of unreleased information can be highly significant in a criminal investigation, but it must be established precisely. Detectives would need to document exactly what Wilder said, when he said it, who heard the statement, and whether there was any innocent way he could have learned the information. A rumor spreading among Beth's friends or acquaintances would not have the same value as a recorded statement containing a detail known only to police and the offender. The publicly available record does not provide a complete transcript of Wilder's questioning. What it shows is that detectives had several reasons to examine him closely: his relationship with Beth, the witness identifications, his interest in photography, his past offenses, and the apparent inconsistency in his account. Before investigators could resolve those questions, another young woman disappeared. Rosario Gonzalez. 8 days before Beth vanished, 20-year-old Rosario Teresa Gonzalez disappeared from the Miami Grand Prix. Rosario, who was known as Chari, was working a temporary promotional job at the racetrack, distributing aspirin samples for a pharmaceutical company. She was also an aspiring model and had participated in the Miss Florida competition. Witnesses reported that Rosario left the racetrack with a white man in his 30s. Her car was later found near DuPont Plaza in Miami. Wilder was a race car driver and was reportedly present at the Miami Grand Prix on the day Rosario disappeared. Rosario was never found. Her disappearance and Beth's shared several important characteristics. Both were young women from the Miami area. Both had an interest in modeling and beauty competitions. Both disappeared within a little more than 1 week. Both had cars that were recovered without them. And Wilder had potential access to both women. These similarities caused investigators to consider whether the two disappearances were connected. They also placed Wilder under increasing scrutiny. Neither Rosario's disappearance nor Beth's has ever resulted in a murder conviction, and neither woman's remains have been recovered. During the weeks after Beth vanished, women began disappearing or being attacked in several states. Investigators gradually recognized a pattern involving an offender who approached young women at shopping centers, offered modeling or photography opportunities, and persuaded them to accompany him. Some of the women were abducted, sexually assaulted, and murdered. Several survivors later described being restrained, tortured, and transported across state lines. The surviving victims provided evidence that was far stronger than general similarities between cases. They could describe the offender, his vehicles, his behavior, and the techniques he used to gain their trust. Those accounts directed investigators toward Wilder. The developing evidence also changed how authorities viewed the disappearances of Rosario Gonzalez and Beth Kenyon. What might originally have appeared to be two isolated missing person investigations now appeared to fit the beginning of a broader series. Wilder became the target of a national manhunt and was placed on the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list. But he continued moving from state to state, changing vehicles and approaching new victims. The cases of women who survived encounters with Wilder provided important evidence about his methods. Linda Grober was approached in a Florida shopping mall after rejecting an offer involving photographs. She survived an abduction and a violent assault. 16-year-old Tina Rosico encountered Wilder at a California shopping center in April 1984. He wore cameras and claimed that he operated a modeling agency. Rosico later described how the friendly presentation changed after she accompanied him. Wilder took control of her through threats and violence and transported her across several states. He forced her to assist him in approaching another teenage girl. That victim, Dawnette Wilt, survived after Wilder left her severely injured in a wooded area. The survivors' descriptions established that Wilder's photography and modeling offers were not harmless conversation. They were part of a method used to isolate and control victims. This does not independently prove that Wilder killed Beth, but it provides context for the gasoline station witness who remembered a discussion about photographs. It also explains why investigators considered Wilder's relationship with a former model especially concerning. By April 1984, authorities across the country were searching for Wilder. On April 13th, he stopped at a gasoline station in Colebrook, New Hampshire, close to the Canadian border. Police officers approached him and attempted to take him into custody. A struggle followed near Wilder's vehicle. Wilder produced a handgun, and shots were fired. One bullet passed through Wilder and injured an officer. Another shot struck Wilder in the chest. Wilder died at the scene. His death ended the immediate danger, but it also ended the possibility of a full interrogation. Investigators could no longer confront him with the gasoline station identifications, his apparent knowledge of Beth's car, or contradictions in his statements. They could not offer him an agreement in exchange for directing them to a body. They could not test his account against newly discovered evidence or observe how he reacted when questioned about individual victims. Wilder died without publicly explaining what happened to Beth Kenyon or Rosario Gonzalez. The case against Wilder is circumstantial but substantial. He knew Beth personally. He reportedly had a romantic interest in her and had been rejected. Witnesses placed a man identified as Wilder with Beth near the time of her disappearance. Their conversation reportedly involved photography. Wilder's later crimes demonstrated that he used photography and false modeling opportunities to approach victims. He allegedly denied seeing Beth, contradicting the witness accounts, and he reportedly knew the location of her abandoned car before police publicly released it. Those facts create a strong investigative theory, but several elements that would be needed for a conclusive legal case are missing. Beth's body has never been recovered. There is no publicly known crime scene. No cause or manner of death has been established. No publicly disclosed DNA, fingerprint, or other forensic evidence places Wilder inside Beth's car or proves that he harmed her. The gasoline station identification was based on witness memory rather than recorded images. Wilder never confessed, and his statements were never tested at trial. For those reasons, it is accurate to describe Wilder as the primary or leading suspect. It is not accurate to say that a court proved he murdered Beth. Investigators must always consider whether a missing adult chose to disappear. In Beth's case, the available circumstances argue strongly against that possibility. She left her purse behind. She had not packed for a journey. She did not resign from her job or tell the school she would be absent. She did not notify her roommate, parents, or friends. Her vehicle was abandoned in an airport, but no evidence showed that she boarded a flight. She also disappeared in the middle of an apparently stable life, leaving her employment, home, and personal relationships without explanation. An adult has the legal right to leave, but voluntary disappearances usually create some trail. Transportation records, money withdrawals, identification use, contact with someone, or evidence of planning. No such trail has been publicly established for Beth. The case remains classified as an endangered or involuntary disappearance, and foul play is suspected. Why Beth has never been found, South Florida presented difficult search conditions. The region contains canals, isolated rural areas, construction sites, dense vegetation, and vast sections of the Everglades. Wilder was also comfortable traveling long distances. His later crimes crossed numerous state lines, demonstrating that investigators could not assume a victim would be left close to the place of abduction. Beth might have been taken somewhere in South Florida. She might have been transported to another part of the state. Or she might have been carried hundreds of miles away to another state. Without a verified crime scene, investigators had no reliable starting point for a concentrated search. Wilder's death also meant that no one could ask him to identify a disposal location. Years later, independent researchers have suggested that Wilder may have transported victims between states, but those proposals remain investigative theories rather than official findings in Beth's case. Modern forensic science could help if physical evidence from Beth's case still exists. Her car would be the most important object. If investigators preserved hairs, fingerprints, fabric, soil, or biological material collected from the Chrysler, those items could potentially be re-examined using methods unavailable in 1984. A suitable DNA profile could be compared with Wilder's known relatives or with reference material preserved from him. Soil, pollen, or plant material might help identify another location where the car had traveled. Modern fingerprint databases could reconsider unidentified prints. Investigators could also compare Beth's DNA with unidentified remains discovered in Florida and across the country. The National Missing and Unidentified Person System allows agencies to compare missing person information, dental records, physical characteristics, and DNA with unidentified decedents. However, technology cannot provide an answer unless useful evidence was collected and preserved. If the vehicle was released, evidence was discarded, or the remaining samples are contaminated, modern testing may have little to examine. The absence of Beth's body remains the greatest forensic obstacle. A body could establish what happened, reveal the manner of death, and potentially preserve evidence identifying the person responsible. Without it, investigators are trying to prove a crime whose location and exact nature remain unknown. As of July 2026, Elizabeth Kenyon's disappearance still remains unresolved. Public missing person records continued to list the Miami-Dade County Police Department as the investigating agency. No law enforcement agency has publicly announced that Beth's remains have been found or that her case has been officially closed. Recent independent reporting has renewed attention on Christopher Wilder and the possibility that his number of victims was greater than previously documented. Researchers have compared his movements with unsolved disappearances and unidentified remains across the United States and Australia. That work may generate leads, but an independent podcast, documentary, or historical investigation cannot officially solve Beth's case. A resolution would require authenticated evidence accepted by the investigating agency, such as Beth's remains, a reliable forensic connection, a verified witness account, or records establishing what happened after she left Coral Gables. For now, the most responsible conclusion remains unchanged. Christopher Wilder is strongly suspected, but Beth's fate has not been proved. What investigators can learn from the case. Beth's disappearance demonstrates how quickly a missing person case can become part of a larger pattern. At first, investigators were looking for one absent teacher and one missing car. Then they learned about a possible sighting with a photographer. They connected Beth with another missing young woman. Soon, survivors in other states described an offender using the same type of photography offer. The case shows why investigators must compare incidents across jurisdictional boundaries. A local detective may see only one disappearance. A statewide or national analysis may reveal that the same vehicle, occupation, approach, or suspect appears repeatedly. It also demonstrates the importance of acting quickly when a dependable person suddenly misses work without explanation. Beth's school recognized that her absence was unusual. That concern led to the missing person report. The case further shows the value of survivor testimony. Wilder's surviving victims provided information about his behavior that investigators could compare with earlier unsolved cases. Most importantly, the investigation reminds us that a convincing theory is not the same as proof. Wilder's known actions may explain Beth's disappearance, but the final conclusion must still be based on evidence. Christopher Wilder's name became nationally known. Beth Kenyon's name deserves to be remembered for reasons unrelated to him. She was a university graduate. She was an educator working with special needs students who needed additional support. She coached young women and participated in her community. She had modeled and competed in pageants, but she was not simply a beauty queen or a photograph in a missing person file. She was a daughter, roommate, friend, teacher, and mentor. Her parents died without learning what happened to her. Perhaps preserved evidence from her car can still be tested. Perhaps unidentified remains will someday produce a DNA match. Perhaps a forgotten document, photograph, or witness statement will reveal where Wilder traveled after meeting Beth. Until then, her disappearance remains one of South Florida's most haunting cold cases. I'm Alan Key, and this has been Cold Cases with Alan Key. For more examinations of history's most troubling unsolved disappearances and murders, and the modern science that could help solve them, read my book, Cold Cases, The Most Infamous Unsolved Murders and the Science That Could Solve Them Today, available now on Amazon at the link in the description. Please subscribe to this channel, share this episode, and join me next time as we examine another cold case from an investigator's perspective. Until next time, remember, behind every cold case is a victim. Behind every unanswered question is a family still waiting for answers. And no matter how many years have passed, the truth still matters.